The North Atlantic in February 1943 was a graveyard of steel and dreams. Beneath its icy surface, a silent war raged between hunters and hunted, where death came without warning from the crushing depths or the explosive kiss of a torpedo. It was in these waters that the HMS Seraph, a British T-class submarine, began what should have been a routine patrol mission. What it became was something that naval historians still struggle to explain 8 decades later. The story begins not with the submarine itself, but with the men who sailed her into the abyss. Commander David Hartwell, a career naval officer from Portsmouth, had skippered the Seraph through 12 successful patrols. At 34, he was considered one of the Royal Navy's most capable submarine commanders, known for his methodical approach to warfare and his uncanny ability to bring his crew home alive. His service record was exemplary, his reputation unquestioned. The crew of 53 men represented the finest the Royal Navy could muster. Petty Officer James Morrison, the boat's chief of the watch, had served on submarines since 1938 and survived the sinking of 2 previous vessels. Leading seaman Thomas Brighton, barely 21, operated the torpedo tubes with precision that had sunk 3 German merchant vessels in previous engagements. These were not green recruits or war-weary veterans pushed beyond their limits. They were professional sailors at the height of their abilities. On February 18, 1943, the Seraph departed from Holy Loch, Scotland, bound for patrol grid reference Charlie 7 in the North Atlantic shipping lanes. Intelligence reports indicated increased U-boat activity in the area, and Allied convoys were suffering devastating losses. The submarine's mission parameters were standard for the period: seek and destroy enemy vessels, gather intelligence on German naval movements, and return to base within 21 days. The weather conditions were typical for the North Atlantic in winter. Surface temperatures hovered around freezing, with 15-foot swells and winds exceeding 30 knots. Beneath the surface, where submarines conducted their deadly business, the water temperature remained a constant 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and so visibility was limited, and the conditions were complicated by thermal layers that could hide or reveal submarines depending on their depth and heading. For the first week of patrol, the Seraph's radio operator, leading telegraphist William Cox, maintained regular contact with Naval Command through encrypted transmissions. His messages followed standard protocol, reporting position, weather conditions, and operational status at predetermined intervals. The last confirmed transmission from the Seraph was received at 0347 hours on February 26, 1943. The message was brief and routine. Position confirmed. No contacts. Proceeding as ordered. What happened next would challenge everything the Royal Navy thought it understood about submarine warfare. At 14:20 hours on March 2nd, 1943, the destroyer HMS Valiant detected a submarine running on the surface, approximately 40 nautical miles northwest of the Shetland Islands. The vessel was identified through binoculars as the HMS Seraph, though its behavior was immediately recognized as unusual. Submarines running on the surface in daylight during wartime violated every principle of underwater warfare. The surface of the ocean was a death sentence for submarines, exposing them to air attack, surface vessels, and long-range artillery. No submarine commander would voluntarily surface his boat in hostile waters unless facing an emergency of catastrophic proportions. Captain Robert Sterling, commanding officer of the Valiant, ordered his signalman to establish visual contact with the Seraph using traditional flag signals. Naval protocol required positive identification before approaching any vessel, friendly or otherwise. The response from the submarine was immediate but deeply troubling. The Seraph acknowledged the signals correctly, using proper recognition codes that proved its identity beyond doubt. However, the signals themselves were transmitted in a manner that experienced naval personnel described as mechanical, lacking the subtle variations that human operators typically displayed. As the Valiant approached to within 500 yards, Captain Sterling observed the submarine through his binoculars with growing unease. The Seraph appeared to be maintaining perfect trim and heading, its diesel engines running at standard cruising speed. The boat showed no visible damage from enemy action, no signs of flooding or mechanical failure that would necessitate emergency surfacing. More disturbing was the complete absence of crew members on the bridge or deck. Submarine protocol required a minimum bridge watch of 3 personnel whenever running on the surface. The officer of the deck, a lookout, and a helmsman were essential for safe navigation and enemy detection. The Seraph's bridge was empty, its conning tower sealed, with no indication that anyone was controlling the vessel from within. Captain Sterling attempted radio contact on multiple frequencies, both encrypted and open channels. The Seraph's radio remained silent despite repeated calls using proper authentication codes. Visual signals requesting the submarine to heave to and prepare for boarding went unanswered, though the vessel continued to acknowledge identification signals with mechanical precision. The tactical situation presented Captain Sterling with a dilemma that naval training had not prepared him to handle. The submarine was clearly British, properly identified, and following a course that would bring it into friendly waters. However, its behavior suggested either a catastrophic emergency or something far more sinister. German forces had captured Allied vessels before, using them to infiltrate naval formations and launch surprise attacks. Sterling ordered his crew to general quarters and approached the Seraph with weapons trained but not actively targeting. The destroyer's sonar operator reported that the submarine's acoustic signature was consistent with a T-class boat running at standard cruising speed. No unusual mechanical noises, no sounds of flooding or damage, nothing to indicate internal problems that would explain the crew's absence from their posts. At a distance of 200 yards, Sterling could observe the submarine in detail through high-powered binoculars. The Seraph's hull appeared intact, its paint scheme and markings consistent with Royal Navy standards. The vessel's trim was perfect, maintaining precise depth and heading with the accuracy of an experienced crew. Yet the boat remained sealed, its crew invisible, continuing on a course that would bring it into British territorial waters within 6 hours. The decision to board the submarine was not made lightly. Royal Navy regulations provided clear guidance for dealing with derelict vessels, enemy prizes, and ships in distress. However, the Seraph fit none of these categories. It was a British warship, properly identified and apparently under control, yet exhibiting behavior that suggested no human presence aboard. Sterling selected a boarding party consisting of his most experienced personnel. Lieutenant Commander Michael Preston, the Valiant's executive officer, would lead the team. Chief Petty Officer Samuel Hughes, a veteran of submarine warfare with extensive knowledge of T-class boats, would provide technical expertise. Marine Sergeant Robert Davies and 4 Royal Marines would provide security in case the vessel had been captured by enemy forces. The boarding operation commenced at 16:30 hours under deteriorating weather conditions. The North Atlantic was building toward another winter storm, with increasing swells making small boat operations increasingly dangerous. The Seraph continued its steady course, showing no response to the approaching boarding party beyond the mechanical acknowledgement of visual signals. As the Valiant's motor launch approached the submarine's hull, Chief Petty Officer Hughes noted several anomalies that experienced submarine personnel would immediately recognize as unusual. The boat's diesel exhaust was clean and steady, indicating proper engine operation. The submarine's trim remained perfect despite the increasing sea state, suggesting active ballast control. Most significantly, the vessel's speed and heading remained constant to a degree that exceeded human capability. Lieutenant Commander Preston was first aboard the Seraph, climbing the wet ladder to the submarined Easevens deck with the practice officer who had performed similar operations dozens of times. What he found challenged everything he thought he understood about naval warfare and submarine operations. The submarine's deck was immaculate, recently swabbed and properly maintained. Equipment was secured according to regulations, with no signs of hasty abandonment or enemy action. The deck gun was properly stowed, ammunition hatches secured, and safety equipment in its designated locations. Everything appeared normal, except for the complete absence of any crew members. Preston signaled for the boarding party to join him on deck before attempting to enter the submarine's interior. Standard procedure required securing the vessel externally before venturing into enclosed spaces where enemy personnel might be waiting in ambush. The Marines established defensive positions, while Hughes examined the submarine's external systems for signs of sabotage or unusual modifications. The conning tower hatch was sealed but not locked, secured with standard naval procedures that suggested normal operations rather than emergency abandonment. Preston tested the hatch mechanism and found it functioning properly, with no signs of damage or forced entry. The submarine's periscope was retracted to its proper position, and the snorkel system showed no evidence of recent use. Hughes reported that all external systems appeared to be functioning normally. The submarine's ballast tank vents were properly configured for surface running. The rudder responded to the boat's steady course, and the propeller shaft exhibited the regular vibration pattern of healthy diesel engines. From an engineering perspective, the Seraph was operating exactly as a properly maintained T-class submarine should operate. The moment of truth came when Preston turned the wheel mechanism that would open the conning tower hatch and provide access to the submarine's interior. As the hatch lifted, revealing the dark interior of the boat below, a gust of air escaped that carried with it the familiar smells of a submarine at sea. Diesel fumes, cooking odours, tobacco smoke, and the metallic scent of recycled air that every submarine sailor knew intimately. What it didn't carry was any sound of human activity. No voices, no footsteps, no mechanical noise beyond the steady hum of electrical systems and the distant rumble of diesel engines. The Seraph was running perfectly, maintained immaculately, and completely empty of human life. Preston descended into the submarine's interior with Chief Petty Officer Hughes following close behind. The Marines remained topside, maintaining security while the two naval officers began their exploration of what would prove to be one of the most inexplicable discoveries in maritime history. The control room was the first compartment they entered, and what they found there would haunt both men for the remainder of their lives. The control room of HMS Seraph presented a scene that defied rational explanation. Every gauge, switch, and instrument was positioned exactly where it should be for a submarine running at standard surface cruising speed. The boat's trimboard showed perfect balance, with ballast tanks configured for optimal surface stability. Engine telegraphs were set to a head standard, matching the vessel's current speed through the water. More disturbing was the evidence of recent human activity throughout the compartment. A cup of tea sat on the chart table, still warm to the touch, with steam rising from its surface in the cool air. The navigation plot showed the submarine's course accurately marked in pencil, with the final position entry dated just 2 hours earlier. A half-eaten sandwich lay on a plate beside the radio equipment, its edges showing no signs of staleness or decay. Chief Petty Officer Hughes examined the boat's electrical systems with the methodical precision of a veteran submarine engineer. Every switch was in its proper position, every circuit functioning exactly as designed. The submarine's batteries showed full charge, indicating the diesel engines had been running efficiently for their intended purpose of both propulsion and electrical generation. The radio equipment puzzled Hughes more than any other system aboard the vessel. The transmitter was properly tuned and functional, capable of sending and receiving messages across the full range of naval frequencies. Yet the radio log showed no entries beyond the final transmission received by Naval Command 6 days earlier. The equipment appeared to be operating autonomously, acknowledging signals without human intervention. Lieutenant Commander Preston moved aft through the submarine's cramped passageways, documenting everything he observed with the trained eye of an experienced naval officer. The crew's quarters presented the most unsettling evidence of the submarine's mysterious condition. Bunks were made with military precision, personal belongings arranged exactly as regulations required. Photographs of families and sweethearts remained pinned to bulkheads. Letters from home lay folded in footlockers, and uniforms hung properly pressed in narrow wardrobes. In the petty officer's mess, Preston discovered a card game, abandoned in mid-hand. 5 hands of cribbage were dealt face down on the small table, with a 6th hand lying face up showing a promising combination of cards. A pencil lay beside a scoring sheet that tracked the game's progress through several rounds. The final entry was marked with a timestamp of 1400 hours that very day. The galley showed signs of meal preparation interrupted at a crucial moment. A pot of stew simmered on the electric burner, properly seasoned and nearly ready to serve. Bread dough rose in covered bowls, shaped and ready for baking. The ship's cook had apparently been preparing the evening meal when whatever happened aboard the Seraph occurred. Hughes joined Preston in the engine room, where the submarine's twin diesel engines ran with the smooth precision of well-maintained machinery. Every gauge indicated normal operation, fuel consumption tracking exactly with the boat's speed and duration at sea. The engine showed no signs of tampering, modification, or unusual wear that might explain the crew's disappearance. The torpedo room presented perhaps the most chilling evidence of the submarine's normal operations up until the moment of abandonment. 6 torpedoes were properly loaded in their tubes, armed and ready for combat. The weapons maintenance logs showed daily inspections completed according to schedule, with the final entry made that morning by leading seaman Thomas Brighton, whose signature was clearly recognizable to Hughes. Preston examined the submarine's weapons systems with particular attention to any signs of combat or emergency. The boat's ammunition was fully accounted for, with no rounds fired since the beginning of the patrol. Damage control equipment remained properly stowed, showing no evidence of flooding, fire, or other emergencies that might force a crew to abandon their vessel. The submarine's medical bay contained additional mysteries that deepened rather than resolved the puzzle of the Seraph's condition. The boat's medical log, maintained by the ship's pharmacist mate, showed routine entries for minor injuries and seasickness treatments throughout the patrol. The final medical entry was dated February 28, describing treatment for a cook's mate who had suffered a minor burn while preparing breakfast. More puzzling was the discovery of medical equipment that appeared to have been used recently. Bandages showed signs of fresh handling. Medical instruments were clean but not properly stowed, and a bottle of iodine remained uncapped on the examination table. Yet there was no record of any medical emergency, no indication of injury or illness that might explain the crew's fate. Hughes made a discovery in the boat's engineering spaces that would prove crucial to later investigations. The submarine's logbooks, normally maintained with obsessive precision by submarine crews, showed entries up until 1200 hours on March 2nd. The final entry, made in Commander Hartwell's distinctive handwriting, read simply, "All systems normal. Proceeding on assigned patrol station." The handwriting analysis would later confirm that the entry was genuine, made by the submarine's commanding officer using his personal pen. However, the timestamp indicated the entry was made just 4 hours before the Valiant spotted the unmanned submarine running on the surface. Preston's examination of the submarine's communications equipment revealed another layer of mystery. The boat's codebooks were properly secured, showing no signs of tampering or unauthorized access. Radio frequencies were correctly set for the patrol area, and encryption keys matched those issued for the Seraph's mission. Yet the communications log showed no outgoing transmissions beyond the final message received by Naval Command days earlier. The submarine's periscope and navigation equipment provided additional evidence of normal operations continuing until the moment of discovery. The periscope's optical systems were clean and properly maintained, with no damage or modifications. Navigation instruments showed accurate readings consistent with the boat's position and heading. The boat's compass was properly compensated, and the gyroscope functioned within normal parameters. As Preston and Hughes completed their initial survey of the submarine's interior, both men struggled to process what they had observed. The Seraph was operating exactly as a submarine should operate, maintained by a crew that had vanished without leaving any trace of their departure. Every system functioned perfectly, every procedure had been followed correctly, and every piece of equipment remained in its designated location. The boarding party's radio report to Captain Sterling aboard the Valiant was necessarily brief, but profoundly disturbing. The submarine was seaworthy, fully operational, and completely abandoned by its crew. No signs of combat, no evidence of emergency, no indication of what had caused 53 experienced sailors to disappear from a perfectly functioning warship. Sterling faced a decision that would haunt him for the remainder of his naval career. The Seraph was clearly a British submarine, properly identified and apparently undamaged. However, its condition defied every principle of submarine warfare and naval operations. No crew abandoned a functional vessel without cause, and no cause was evident aboard the mysterious submarine. The tactical situation was complicated by deteriorating weather conditions and the approach of darkness. The North Atlantic in early March was no place for extended small boat operations, and the boarding party needed to either secure the submarine or return to the Valiant before conditions became dangerous. Hughes volunteered to remain aboard the Seraph with a skeleton crew from the Valiant, bringing the submarine into port under its own power. His extensive submarine experience made him the logical choice to operate the vessel, though the prospect of sailing an abandoned submarine through hostile waters was daunting even for a veteran submariner. Preston supported Hughes's recommendation, noting that the submarine systems appeared stable and reliable. The boat's fuel supplies were adequate for the journey to friendly waters, and its navigation equipment would allow accurate course plotting. However, both officers acknowledged the unprecedented nature of their situation and the risks involved in operating an undermanned submarine. Sterling approved the plan with considerable reluctance, assigning 6 experienced sailors from the Valiant to assist Hughes in bringing the Seraph home. The mixed crew would be barely adequate to operate the submarine safely, but sufficient for the relatively short journey to the Scottish coast. As the boarding party prepared to split up, with most returning to the Valiant and a few remaining aboard the mysterious submarine, Hughes made one final discovery that would add another layer of complexity to an already inexplicable situation. In the submarine's safe, secured behind a combination lock that only the commanding officer should have known, he found a sealed envelope addressed to Naval Intelligence with instructions that it be opened only in the event of the crew's disappearance. The envelope's existence suggested that Commander Hartwell had anticipated whatever fate befell his crew, taking precautions to ensure that crucial information would survive even if the submarine's personnel did not. The implications were staggering, hinting at knowledge of threats or circumstances that had not been shared with Naval Command. As darkness fell over the North Atlantic and the skeleton crew prepared to take HMS Seraph home, they carried with them questions that would challenge the Royal Navy's understanding of submarine warfare and the mysterious forces that operated beneath the ocean's surface. The envelope remained unopened during the tense journey back to Holy Loch, its presence weighing heavily on the minds of the makeshift crew aboard HMS Seraph. Hughes had made the decision to leave it sealed, recognizing that whatever Commander Hartwell had anticipated was beyond the scope of a chief petty officer's authority. The submarine's behavior during the transit only deepened the mystery surrounding its condition. Throughout the 16-hour journey to Scottish waters, the Seraph operated with mechanical perfection that exceeded normal human capability. The boat maintained precise heading and speed, despite changing sea conditions, requiring minimal input from the skeleton crew. Hughes, with over a decade of submarine experience, had never encountered a vessel that seemed to sail itself with such unwavering accuracy. The diesel engines ran without variation, consuming fuel at exactly the rate specified in technical manuals. The submarine's electrical systems functioned flawlessly, batteries charging and discharging in perfect cycles. Even the boat's trim remained constant despite the shifting weight of fuel consumption and the movement of the reduced crew. It was as if the Seraph had become a ghost ship, operated by invisible hands that understood submarine warfare better than living sailors. More disturbing were the sounds that emanated from empty sections of the submarine during the night watch. Footsteps echoed through vacant compartments, following the familiar patterns of routine patrols. The sound of hatches opening and closing came from areas where no crew members were stationed. Phantom voices carried through the boat's ventilation system, speaking in the familiar cadences of submarine operations, but never quite clear enough to understand. Hughes initially attributed these phenomena to the stress of operating an undermanned vessel in hostile waters. Submarines were notorious for playing tricks on their crews' minds, and the Seraph's mysterious condition would naturally heighten psychological tension. However, when other crew members independently reported identical experiences, the explanation became less convincing. The most unsettling incident occurred during the early morning hours as the submarine approached the Orkney Islands. Seaman First Class Robert Mitchell, standing watch in the control room, reported hearing the submarine's general alarm klaxon sound 3 times in rapid succession. The alarm was the boat's standard signal for emergency surface or dive operations, requiring immediate crew response throughout the vessel. Mitchell followed standard procedure, alerting the other crew members and checking all compartments for signs of emergency. However, investigation revealed no activated alarm systems, no indication that any warning signals had been triggered. The boat's electrical logs showed no record of alarm activation, and the klaxon itself tested normally when manually operated. What made Mitchell's report particularly credible was the simultaneous reaction of the other crew members. Despite being stationed in different parts of the submarine, all 5 men had heard the same alarm sequence and responded according to their training. Yet the submarine systems showed no evidence that any alarm had sounded, suggesting a collective auditory hallucination that defied psychological explanation. Hughes documented each incident in the boat's log, maintaining the detailed records that submarine operations required. His entries grew increasingly terse as the journey progressed, reflecting his struggle to describe phenomena that challenged rational understanding. The final entry before reaching port read simply, "Boat operates normally. Crew experiences require investigation by appropriate authorities." The arrival of HMS Seraph at Holy Loch on March 4, 1943, created an unprecedented situation for Royal Navy command structure. The submarine's condition was immediately classified at the highest levels, with access restricted to personnel holding special intelligence clearances. The boat was placed under heavy guard, isolated from normal port operations, while investigators attempted to unravel the mystery of its crew's disappearance. Rear Admiral Sir James Whitworth, commanding officer of the Holy Loch submarine base, convened an emergency board of inquiry within hours of the Seraph's arrival. The board included senior submarine commanders, intelligence officers, and technical specialists with expertise in underwater warfare. Their mandate was broad but urgent: determine what had happened to the Seraph's crew and assess whether the incident represented a new form of enemy action. The sealed envelope found in Commander Hartwell's safe was opened in the presence of the full board, revealing contents that transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into a matter of national security. Hartwell's letter, written in his characteristic precise handwriting, described encounters and observations that challenged the board members' understanding of submarine warfare. According to the letter, the Seraph had been experiencing unusual phenomena since the beginning of its patrol. Equipment malfunctions occurred in patterns that suggested intelligent interference rather than random mechanical failure. Navigation instruments provided readings that didn't correspond to the boat's actual position, leading to course corrections that seemed to guide the submarine towards specific coordinates rather than its assigned patrol area. More significantly, Hartwell reported contact with unidentified underwater objects that exhibited capabilities far exceeding known submarine technology. These objects appeared on sonar as solid contacts, but demonstrated speed and maneuverability that defied the laws of physics as understood by naval engineers. They seemed to observe the Seraph without making hostile moves, maintaining distance while clearly tracking the submarine's movements. The letter described the crew's growing unease as these encounters increased in frequency and intensity. Experienced sailors reported seeing lights beneath the water that moved with purpose and intelligence. The boat's sonar operator detected sounds that resembled mechanical operation, but followed no recognizable pattern of known vessels or natural phenomena. Hartwell's final entries in the letter suggested that these encounters were not random, but represented some form of systematic observation or study. The unknown objects seemed particularly interested in the submarine's weapon systems and nuclear capabilities, though the Seraph carried only conventional torpedoes and depth charges. The letter concluded with Hartwell's assessment that his crew was being prepared for something beyond their understanding or control. He had sealed the letter as insurance, hoping that its contents might provide clues if the submarine's personnel met an unknown fate. His final paragraph was prophetic in its accuracy. If this letter is being read, it means that whatever has been observing us has finally acted. The crew of HMS Seraph may be gone, but the boat itself will continue to serve purposes we cannot comprehend. The Board of Inquiry faced an unprecedented challenge in processing Hartwell's revelations. The letter's contents suggested encounters with technology that surpassed anything in the Allied or Axis arsenals. The implications extended far beyond a single missing submarine crew, potentially representing a new form of warfare or contact with forces entirely outside human experience. Dr. Margaret Sinclair, a marine biologist attached to the Admiralty's Research Division, was brought in to assess the scientific plausibility of Hartwell's descriptions. Her analysis of the submarine's condition revealed additional anomalies that supported rather than contradicted the letter's extraordinary claims. The Seraph's hull showed microscopic alterations to its steel composition that were impossible to achieve through conventional means. The metal had been restructured at a molecular level, creating alloys that were stronger and more flexible than original construction materials. These modifications appeared throughout the submarine's structure, but were most pronounced around sensitive equipment and weapons systems. More puzzling were traces of unknown organic compounds found throughout the submarine's interior. These substances didn't match any known biological materials, exhibiting properties that suggested both organic and synthetic origins. They seemed to be concentrated in areas where the crew spent the most time, particularly sleeping quarters and common areas. Dr. Sinclair's most disturbing discovery came from analysis of the submarine's air supply. The boat's atmosphere contained trace amounts of gases that didn't exist in nature or industrial processes. These compounds appeared to have psychoactive properties that could explain the phantom experiences reported by the skeleton crew, but their origin remained completely mysterious. The investigation expanded to include examination of other submarines that had operated in the same patrol areas as the Seraph. 3 additional boats reported similar equipment malfunctions and unusual sonar contacts, though none had experienced crew disappearances. The patterns suggested a systematic study or mapping operation conducted by unknown forces using methods that left minimal physical evidence. Intelligence analysis revealed that German U-boat activity in the North Atlantic had also shown unusual patterns during the same time period. Several German submarines had been reported missing without explanation, and intercepted radio traffic included references to phantom contacts and impossible underwater speeds that matched descriptions in Hartwell's letter. The possibility that both Allied and Axis naval forces were encountering the same unknown phenomena added another layer of complexity to the investigation. If true, It suggested that the mysterious objects were operating independently of any earthly nation or military force, pursuing objectives that transcended human political conflicts. The Board of Inquiry's classified report, completed after 6 weeks of intensive investigation, concluded that HMS Seraph had encountered forces or entities possessing technology far in advance of 1943 capabilities. The crew's disappearance was attributed to unknown non-hostile extraction, based on the lack of damage to the submarine and the careful preservation of its operational systems. Recommendations included enhanced sonar monitoring of submarine patrol areas, development of new detection equipment capable of tracking high-speed underwater objects, and establishment of protocols for reporting unusual encounters without compromising operational security. The report's classification level ensured that its contents remained hidden from public knowledge for decades. HMS Seraph was quietly returned to service after extensive modifications to its detection and communication equipment. The submarine completed 12 additional patrols during the remainder of World War II, though it never again experienced the phenomena described in Commander Hartwell's letter. The boat's service record showed no indication of its mysterious empty voyage, maintaining the official fiction that nothing unusual had occurred. The fate of the Seraph's original crew remained unknown despite extensive intelligence efforts to trace their disappearance. No evidence of capture, defection, or death was ever discovered. The 53 sailors had simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and a submarine that continued to serve the Royal Navy as if nothing had happened. Post-war analysis of the Seraph incident revealed patterns that intelligence officials had initially dismissed as coincidental. Throughout 1943 and 1944, Royal Navy submarines operating in the North Atlantic reported an unusual number of equipment malfunctions that defied standard troubleshooting procedures. Navigation systems would spontaneously recalibrate themselves to more accurate settings. Sonar equipment detected contacts that moved in ways that violated known principles of underwater propulsion. Radio operators intercepted transmissions on frequencies that shouldn't have existed, speaking in languages that linguistics experts couldn't identify. The Admiralty's response was characteristically bureaucratic and methodical. A new classification system was established for reports that couldn't be explained through conventional analysis. These incidents were designated as Category 7 events, requiring special handling procedures and distribution limited to personnel with ultra-clearance. The classification effectively buried most reports in files that few officers had authority to access. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, working in the Admiralty's Signals Intelligence Division, noticed correlations between Category 7 reports that her superiors had overlooked. Submarines experiencing unusual phenomena were consistently operating in specific geographic areas of the North Atlantic. These zones formed a rough pattern that didn't correspond to known German patrol routes, Allied convoy lanes, or natural oceanographic features. Mitchell's unauthorized analysis revealed that the mysterious zones shifted position over time, following patterns that suggested purposeful movement rather than random distribution. The areas seemed to expand and contract based on factors that had nothing to do with military operations or weather conditions. Most significantly, submarines entering these zones often reported improved performance in ways that couldn't be explained by crew experience or equipment modifications. The HMS Thunderbolt, sister ship to the Seraph, encountered one of these zones in September 1943 during a patrol northwest of Ireland. Commander William Hayes reported that his submarine's engines suddenly began operating at efficiency levels that exceeded factory specifications. Fuel consumption dropped by 15% while speed increased proportionally. The boat's electrical systems generated more power while drawing less current from the batteries. Hayes initially suspected that his engineering crew had made unauthorized modifications to improve performance. However, detailed inspection revealed no changes to any mechanical systems. The submarine was operating exactly as designed, but achieving results that violated basic principles of marine engineering. The phenomenon lasted for 6 days before gradually returning to normal operational parameters. More puzzling was the effect on Hayes's crew during this period. Sailors reported increased alertness and reduced fatigue despite maintaining normal watch schedules. The boat's cook noted that food supplies seemed to last longer than calculated, though no additional provisions had been loaded. Medical complaints dropped to 0, with crew members showing improved health metrics across all measured categories. Hayes documented these observations in his patrol report, but higher command dismissed them as the result of improved crew morale and favourable weather conditions. The official response reflected the Royal Navy's institutional reluctance to acknowledge phenomena that challenged established doctrine and scientific understanding. The pattern of official denial began to crack when similar reports emerged from other naval services. The United States Navy's submarine force in the Pacific Theater reported comparable incidents involving unexplained equipment improvements and crew performance enhancements. Soviet submarines operating in Arctic waters filed classified reports describing encounters with underwater objects that demonstrated impossible maneuverability. Most revealing were intercepted German communications that referenced what Nazi naval intelligence termed Die Geister U-Boote, the ghost submarines. German U-boat commanders reported encounters with vessels that appeared on sonar but couldn't be engaged with conventional weapons. These contacts seemed to observe German operations without interfering, maintaining distance while clearly tracking submarine movements. The convergence of reports from opposing naval forces suggested that all participants in the underwater war were encountering the same mysterious phenomena. The implications extended far beyond military tactics, hinting at the presence of observers with technology that surpassed anything developed by earthly nations. Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, a German marine engineer captured after the war, provided additional insights during interrogation by Allied intelligence. Zimmermann had been assigned to investigate unusual U-boat reports and had concluded that German submarines were being studied by unknown entities possessing advanced underwater technology. According to Zimmermann's testimony, German naval intelligence had identified specific areas of the Atlantic where these encounters occurred most frequently. The Kriegsmarine had attempted to establish contact with the unknown objects, using radio transmissions on multiple frequencies and even visual signals from surfaced submarines. All attempts at communication were ignored, though the objects continued their apparent observation activities. Zimmermann's most significant revelation concerned German attempts to capture or destroy one of the mysterious objects. In October 1943, U-boat 847 was ordered to attack an unknown contact that had been shadowing German submarines for several days. The U-boat fired 2 torpedoes at the target from close range, with sonar confirming direct hits. The torpedoes exploded on impact, but the target showed no signs of damage or distress. Instead, it accelerated to speeds that Zimmermann calculated at over 100 knots, disappearing from sonar range within seconds. U-boat 847 was found 3 days later, surfaced and abandoned, its crew missing without explanation. The submarine's condition was identical to that of HMS Seraph, fully operational but completely empty. British intelligence verification of Zimmermann's claims revealed classified German documents that corroborated his testimony. The Kriegsmarine had indeed lost several submarines under circumstances identical to the Seraph incident. German Naval Command had classified these losses as enemy action to maintain crew morale, but internal documents revealed awareness that conventional warfare couldn't explain the disappearances. The post-war intelligence picture that emerged painted a disturbing scenario of systematic observation and occasional intervention by forces possessing technology decades ahead of 1940s capabilities. Both Allied and Axis naval forces had encountered these entities, but institutional reluctance to acknowledge the impossible had prevented effective response or preparation. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, privately acknowledged the reality of these encounters in correspondence with the Chief of Naval Operations. His letters, declassified decades later, described non-terrestrial naval assets operating in all ocean areas with apparent immunity from human military action. Nimitz recommended development of new detection systems and protocols for dealing with entities possessing superior technology. The recommendations were quietly implemented through research programs that operated under cover of conventional military development. Sonar systems were enhanced to detect high-speed underwater objects. Communication equipment was modified to monitor previously unused frequencies. Training programs were established to prepare naval personnel for encounters that defied standard tactical doctrine. These preparations proved prescient when the mysterious encounters resumed during the Cold War. Soviet and American submarines reported similar phenomena during the tense underwater standoffs of the 1950s and 1960s. Nuclear submarines with advanced detection capabilities provided more detailed information about the objects, confirming their non-human origin and peaceful but persistent observation of human naval activities. The mystery of HMS Seraph and her vanished crew remains one of the most perplexing incidents in naval history. 53 experienced sailors disappeared without trace from a perfectly functioning submarine, leaving behind only questions that challenge our understanding of warfare itself. Whatever forces operated beneath the North Atlantic in 1943 possessed capabilities that transcended human technology, observing our conflicts with purposes we may never comprehend. The submarine that surfaced empty serves as a reminder that even in our most desperate wars, we are not alone in the depths,